Hey guys, what's up? This is the second tutorial in our series of basic of basics of programming. Now we're going to start off from where we last left off, and as we all know that to start a C program we need to include these two statements. If you haven't checked out my first video, you can check it out. It's in my channel, and because you got to follow these programs all by the series, because that way you will get to know a little bit more, because we're going to start off from where we left off in every tutorial video. Okay, alright, so that is the basic building block on how to start a C program. We include the standard library functions, and we give the main program name void main, and give it as a void because it doesn't return a value. Okay, now in the last tutorial we learned how to show something we want to see on the console window. Now if you don't know what a console window is and how to do that, you can check out my first tutorial video. Okay, now coming back, our last program was just a basic one. We just printed what we needed to see on the console window. We wanted to print our hello, and we needed to see that, so we needed to enter a character to close the console window, and that way it's just a way of holding the console screen. Okay, now if you press Alt F9, we'll see a success, which means there are no errors, and if you press the run button, we get to see hello. And now if you want to see how to add a new line or get a tab, that is to move the text 8 spaces towards the right, you can check out my first video. Okay, now in this video we're going to learn how to take an input from the user. Okay, now suppose I want to say I want to input a number. Okay, now basically, as we all know, numbers are integers. Okay, and in integers we do not mean any decimal numbers. We mean only constant integers, that is from 1 to, as far as you can think of, 1 million or 1 billion or whatever, and it can go as long as you can think of. Okay, so we need to input a number, a normal integer number, and for that we need to take an integer variable. Okay, so that is an int. This means an integer in C, and we need to give a name to the variable in which we want to store what the user is going to enter. Okay, so we need a variable. Suppose we say a variable a. Okay, we say a variable a, and as it is the end of the sentence, we need to give a semicolon to indicate that it is the end of the sentence. Now we have declared a variable a, and that variable a has got no value, so the user is going to enter a value, and we're going to store it in that variable a, and then we're going to show the user what the user just entered. So that is the basic motive of our program here. So first we need to tell the user what we want the user to do. Actually, we need the user to enter a number, so we're going to write over here enter a number, and give a colon and give a space, and you can always add a new line or whatever if you want to see that text come up in a new line. I don't want to do that, so enter a number. Okay, and when the user enters a number after that sentence, obviously the user is going to enter a number. Now whenever we need to enter a number, we need to scan that number to the C editor. In this case we're actually using Borland, so in whatever editor you're doing, we need to scan the user input into the memory of that variable in which we're going to store it. So we're going to write scan, and just as print we need to add a f. So f is the usual code of C. So when you're trying to print something on the screen, we write print f. When we're trying to scan something into the memory which the user entered, we need to write scan as if we're scanning the document, and then f. A bracket, a first bracket, then we need to give inverted comma, and after the inverted comma we need to write percentage %d. Now we'll get back to this in a moment, percentage %d, what it does, and then and percent, this is called ampersand, and then the variable name in which we want to store it. Now we'll get this in a moment, we're going to understand this in a moment. Now to understand this we need to go to Paint, because I need to show you something in Paint. Okay, we open up Paint. Okay, here we go, and in Paint we're going to actually draw a rectangular box, and fill it up with lines and more lines and more lines and some more lines. Okay, there we go. And just to delete this little bit of line sticking out here, we're just going to take the eraser tool and just delete that, just to make it a little bit more, you know, pretty, perfect, whatever. Alright, so that's not the motive of the program. Now we'll get back to the motive of the program right here. Now, actually, this is your computer memory, okay? We're going to take the pencil tool. This is your computer memory. This is the memory. It is hard writing with a pencil. Okay, this is the computer memory. Okay, now this is your computer memory, and in this memory what the C editor does is that it actually tries to keep a space, to actually assign a space for that variable which you just have assigned to C, you know, which you just, that variable that is declared A. So this is A over here. This is the space. It doesn't have to be this place. It can be any place in the memory. It can be this one or this one or this or this or even the last one. So this C editor, what it does, Borland, it actually assigns a place in the memory with the name A, because you have assigned the variable A. And when the user enters a number, say the user has entered the number 5, and that 5 will be stored in this memory location in which it has assigned the A variable. Okay, so this is the thing. This is basically the thing. Now if you go back to your Borland, you will find that there is this ampersand and this %d. These are the two most confusing things now. Now this %d is just a common syntax. Okay, this is something which you always need to enter or write whenever you're assigning an integer variable. Okay, now get this directly to your memory, okay, not the computer memory, your memory, that whenever I am declaring something as an integer type variable, I need to write %d to assign any number, or obviously a number, because an integer cannot take any other values. It has to be a number. So whenever I'm declaring an integer type variable, be it any name, I need to write %d to assign any number or scan any number to that variable. Okay, so that's the case of %d, and %d will always be written in double inverted commas. Okay, now if you're using an integer variable, you need to write %d. I'll get back to floating point variables, which are actually decimal numbers, and characters, for which you need to write %c, and strings and arrays and different kinds of stuff. But right now I need to focus on integer type variables, and in an integer type variable you need to assign %d within double inverted commas to scan any number into that variable. And this ampersand, what it does is that it actually stores the number to the address of A. Okay, so now see, every memory location in this, you know, in a computer, in any computer, has got several addresses. These addresses are basically the addresses of the memory locations. Okay, so suppose I'm going to draw a box here because writing with a pencil is way too difficult, man. So what I'm going to do is, suppose this memory location has a number, say 2024. It doesn't have to be this, you know, it doesn't have to be always 2024. It can be 2059 or even 7059 or 7111 or whatever it can be. And then suppose this memory location, it has to be 2025 because this is 2024. Okay, and then say 2026, 2027, 2028, and this obviously has to be 2029. Okay, so these are the memory locations, and this A is in memory. The editor has assigned the variable A to this memory location 2024. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to store this number 5 in the address of A. Okay, actually I've done a mistake here. This A, this is not actually stored in the memory location. This 5 is also not stored above the memory location. Actually this A is written, this is the variable, and the editor has assigned this 2024 memory location to this variable a, and whenever we are scanning the 5 or whatever the user has entered, that will go to this memory location 2024. Okay, so that, going back to the C editor, we find that we've written the ampersand. This ampersand is actually for scanning the number the user has entered to the address of A, which in this case is 2024. It can be any other address also. Okay, now once again, that get ch is basically to hold the control screen, and the end of the program would be initiated by curly braces. Okay, so once again, from the beginning, this include stdioh, conio.ioh, void main. These are all explained. These are all simple. Now we want to declare an integer type variable because we need to enter a user number, and so we declare an integer variable a. It can be anything, but remember, whatever your name you're giving over here, that name has to be the same over here, because if you write a here and give that we want to store the number of the user in a variable b, then an error would come up that b is not at all assigned. Okay, so we need to write a over here, and the same name would be coming over here, ampersand that name, because that is the address where the editor will store the user input. So printf, we're going to show this thing on the console screen, enter a number, and then the user is going to enter a number from the keyboard, and that is going to be scanned into the memory of the computer through this editor, and for that we write scanf, scanning the user input, and then F for C because we're using C, then %d is basically because we're using an integer type variable, and then ampersand A because we want to store that number in the address of A, wherever the editor has assigned that variable A. Now we press Alt F9 to see if there is any errors. Obviously there are no errors. Now we press Ctrl F9 to start the program, and we're going to see enter a number. Suppose, as in the paint example, we've used 5, so we're going to use 5, enter a number 5, and oh god, I forgot one thing. So we want also to see what the user has entered, right? So this is what this program, what I did the mistake was, it actually entered the number, the user entered the number, it scanned the number, but we don't have a line to actually show that number to us, what the user has entered. So we're going to write we're going to write you entered, and here I would like a new line. Okay, you entered. Now you entered. Now we need to have the number over here. So since we are going to print a user input, which is actually an integer, which is integer number, so we need to write %d. Whenever we need to use any integer type numbers, we need to use %d. Okay, so that's it. You entered %d, and in that %d, in that place, we need the number. So what is the number? That is assigned to the variable A, not the address of A, because if you print the address of A, it would actually give you this address 2024. So we don't need that address, we need what is stored in A. So we need to go back to editor and say I need to see what the user has entered. So give the first bracket and end of the line. So that's the thing. Alt F9 to see success. So to I'll get back to the printf part. You entered in a bed, one more time I'll explain that. 5, you entered 5. Okay, now there you go. Now once again, this printf part, so what we're actually doing is that we're actually going to see what the user has entered, right? So we first scan the user input via a %d, because this is an integer type variable, and we want to store that number what the user has entered in the address of A, and then we're going to show that number. So now you entered %d, because this is where we need to have the number, and this %d is because we are inputting a integer number. We actually wanted to see an integer number, so integer goes with %d, and then a comma, because this comma is just to show you what we need to see here, then a comma, and then A, because this is the variable in which the input has been stored. We don't write over here %A, because that actually gives you the address of A, this 2024. We don't need the memory location where the editor has stored it. We need the number in which the user has entered. So that is user input using integer. Now suppose we want to input a floating point number, that is a decimal. So all we do is we write float A, and for float we need to give %f, not %d, and then here we need to change it because this is a floating point, a decimal number, so float %f. Now just to success, just You see, and then now we can enter any floating point number, say a decimal, say 5.21. Okay, so the user has entered, you entered 5.21. These 4 zeros are why it's showing. I'm going to tell you in a moment. Actually, what a floating point number is, that it gives 6 places after the decimal point. So since we entered 5.21, those 4 places would be filled up by zeros. Okay, now there are ways in which we can decrease that number of decimal places. Suppose we're at percentage point 2f. What it does is that it says the floating point, sees the editor actually to reserve only 2 places after the decimal. Okay, now if you run that, we're gonna enter a number, say 5.21231. Okay, it's gonna show only 5.23 because we have said that we need only 2 places after the decimal. So you entered 5.23. that one would be ignored. Okay, now say we need 3 places after the decimal, so we run that and say 5.231, and we see 5.231. As simple as that. So once again, going back to the entire program, how do we actually enter, how do we input a user? So include stdioh, that's the standard library functions. Now a floating point number we are taking, we can write integer over here as well, that's int, and for floating point numbers, that's decimal numbers, we write float. Enter a number, we scan the number by a scanf, percentage f because this is a floating point number. If you would have entered integer, we would have write percentage d, ampersand a because we need to store the user input in the address of the variable we just declared a. So that's the address, this is the address, and we need to store the 5 over in this memory location. And then we need to see what the user has entered. So you entered percentage f, or if you want to reduce the decimal places from 6 to 4 or 3, we just write a point and then the number of digits you want to see after the decimal, 3 or 2 or 4 or whatever, and then give the comma after the double invert comma, give the comma and then a, only a, because we don't want to see the address of a, that's 2024. We don't want to see that. We want to see what we have entered, what the user has entered, so only a. So now for the last time, we just enter a number, say I'm bored with 5s now, so it's 4.205. okay, and we have given 3 places after the decimal, so 4.205. okay, so there you go. That's how you take in user input and show that. And the next tutorial, we're going to see some more important uses of this user input. We're going to input with characters, and finally after the characters we're going to do simple mathematical calculations. So lots of things coming up. This is tutorial 2. Be sure to check out tutorial 3 and the next videos on the series. Okay, thank you for watching. Subscribe, post your comments, and happy programming again. Best of luck.